The blizzard swallowed her scream. Vaelira's feet tore through snow, leaving crimson trails that vanished under fresh powder within seconds. Her lungs burned. Her ribs ached with every breath. For heartbeats thundered inside her womb, tiny lives pulsing in rhythm with her terror. Behind her, howls split the frozen night. They were closing in. She clutched her swollen belly, whispering through cracked lips. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just hold on." The Obsidian Fang Pack had hunted her for 3 days without rest. 17 wolves who once called her sister now wanted her dead. Not because she'd broken laws. Not because she'd betrayed anyone. Because she carried 4. An omega bearing quadruplets was impossible. Unnatural. The pack elders declared it the first sign of hierarchical collapse, a corruption that would unravel the dominant structure that kept their world ordered. Her former alpha had given the execution order himself. Vaelira stumbled over a snow-buried root and crashed forward. Pain exploded through her shoulder. She tasted blood. The babies shifted inside her, restless and afraid. No, please. She forced herself up, fingers numb, vision blurring. The howls were so close now she could hear individual voices. Kale, who'd taught her to track. Senra, who'd braided her hair before hunts. All of them coming to end her. Ahead, through the whiteout, massive black pillars emerged like obsidian teeth jutting from the earth. Ancient runes carved into their surfaces pulsed with faint silver light. A boundary marker. Frosthaven territory. Stories flooded her mind. High King Draeven Vaelmorn, the wolf who burned traitors alive. The ruler who'd ended 3 rebellions by erasing entire bloodlines. Mercy wasn't a word associated with Frosthaven's throne. But dying at a border was still better than what her pack would do. She threw herself forward. The moment her body crossed the invisible line between pillars, the runes exploded with crimson light. The color of blood moons. The color of forbidden things. Vaelira collapsed onto frozen ground, consciousness fracturing. Silver shapes materialized through the storm. Wolves twice the size of normal shifters, their fur gleaming like moonlight on steel. The Argent Guard. One shifted into human form. A woman with white blonde hair and scars crossing her collarbone. Omega. You've violated Frosthaven's boundary during Hunt Moon. State your purpose or die. Vaelira tried to speak, but only blood came out. The guard's eyes widened as she noticed the swollen belly, the way Vaelira's hands protected it even while dying. Commander. Another guard, male, his voice urgent. The pillars. Look at the pillars. Every rune blazed crimson now, brighter than they'd been in decades. The color spread like infection across ancient stone. Impossible, the female commander breathed. Nothing triggers red resonance. Nothing alive. She's not alone. The male guard knelt, his hand hovering over Vaelira's stomach. 4 heartbeats. 4 separate life signatures. Silence fell among the wolves. Blood-marked, someone whispered. Before anyone could respond, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. The Argent Guard dropped to one knee in perfect unison. A figure emerged from the blizzard. High King Draeven Vaelmorn stood 7 feet tall in human form, his presence so commanding the storm seemed to bend around him. Black hair fell to his shoulders, framing a face carved from granite and cruelty. His eyes were the color of winter ice, and they held no warmth. He wore no crown. Didn't need one. Report. His voice could freeze marrow. Omega refugee, my king. Pregnant. Crossed during active hunt protocols. The commander kept her eyes down. The pillars reacted to her. Draeven's gaze moved to Vaelira's barely conscious form. Then to the crimson blazing runes. He walked forward with predatory grace and knelt beside her. When his fingers touched her wrist to check her pulse, the pillars screamed. Light erupted upward in columns of blood-red fire. The unborn children inside Vaelira reacted, their tiny heartbeats synchronizing with the ancient magic. Every wolf present shifted back from the display, fear naked on their faces. Draeven's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those ice-cold eyes. He slid one arm under Vaelira's shoulders, the other beneath her knees, and lifted her as though she weighed nothing. Summon the Citadel healers. Full medical wing preparation. Now, my king. The commander's voice was careful. The Omega laws. An outsider bearing abnormal. Did I ask for legal interpretation? Draeven's words could have cut steel. If you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what happens next. And drop a comment telling me what you think Draeven's real motives are, because this king has secrets. The commander bowed lower. No, my king. Then move. The Argent Guard scattered into action. Draeven looked down at the dying woman in his arms. Her lips moved, forming soundless words. Apologies to the lives she carried. You're not dying today, he said quietly. Neither are they. Vaelira's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. She saw his face through a haze of pain and confusion. Why? She managed to whisper. Draeven's joy tightened. Because those pillars haven't burned red in 93 years. And the last time they did, they marked the birth of something that changed our world. He turned and walked into the blizzard, carrying her toward the distant lights of Frosthaven's citadel. Behind them, the Obsidian Fong pack reached the border and stopped dead. They couldn't cross. Wouldn't dare. But their lead hunter, a scarred male named Kale, stared at Draeven's retreating form with murder in his eyes. She's under his protection now, another wolf said. Kale's hands shifted into claws. Then we go to war. The Citadel healers worked through the night. Vaelira drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of gentle hands and urgent voices. Someone cleaned the blood from her skin. Someone else pressed warm cloths against her frozen limbs. The babies inside her settled, their frantic movements calming to steady pulses. She woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The room was enormous, with vaulted ceilings and walls carved from white stone. Fur blankets covered her, so soft she almost wept. Her body still ached, but the sharp edge of dying had retreated. A woman sat beside the bed. Elderly, with silver hair bound in complex braids and eyes that had seen too much. She wore healer's robes marked with lunar symbols. You're awake. Her voice was kind but firm. I'm Myrina, chief healer of Frosthaven. How do you feel? Vaelira's hand went immediately to her belly. Still swollen. Still moving with tiny kicks. They're alive, Myrina confirmed. All four. Somehow. Tears burned Vaelira's eyes. How long? 2 days. You were severely hypothermic, malnourished, and bleeding internally. By all rights, you should be dead. Myrina leaned forward. Who are you running from? Vaelira's throat closed. It doesn't matter. It does if they follow you here. They won't cross Frosthaven borders. Vaelira's voice was hollow. They're not suicidal. Myrina studied her with unsettling intensity. Blood-marked quadruplets. I've been a healer for 60 years and never seen it. The texts say such births only occur when the dominance hierarchy is about to shift. When power itself is being redistributed. Vaelira closed her eyes. That's why they wanted me dead. Your pack. A nod. Myrina's expression hardened. Fools. Killing the mother doesn't stop what's coming. It only delays it. The door opened without warning. High King Draeven entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He wore black leather and furs, weapons strapped to his body with casual efficiency. His presence devoured all the air. Myrina stood and bowed. My king. Leave us. The healer hesitated, glancing at Vaelira, then obeyed. Silence filled the space after the door closed. Draeven stood at the foot of the bed, studying Vaelira the way a general might study a battlefield map. His ice-blue eyes missed nothing. You have a name? His voice was cold, impersonal. Vaelira Nyx. And the father? Her hands clenched in the furs. Dead. How? The pack killed him when they discovered I was pregnant. The words tasted like ash. He was beta. They said he'd corrupted the bloodline by choosing an omega. Something flickered across Draeven's face, too quick to identify. The Obsidian Fong pack, he said. It wasn't a question. Vaelira's eyes widened. How did you? I know every pack within 300 miles. Obsidian Fong has been unstable for years. Paranoid leadership. Excessive culling. He moved to the window, looking out over his snow-covered kingdom. They've requested an audience. Fear spiked through her chest. You can't let them in. I haven't decided yet. They'll kill me. They'll kill the babies. Draeven turned, and his gaze pinned her like a blade. No one kills anything in my citadel without my permission. But you need to understand your situation. You crossed my border during Hunt Moon protocols. That's an executable offense. You're alive because I allow it. Vaelira forced herself to sit up despite the pain. Then kill me. But let someone take the babies. Find them homes far from here. They didn't choose this. You die for them? Without hesitation. Draeven stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled a chair to her bedside and sat, his massive frame somehow both relaxed and coiled for violence. The pillars reacted to you, he said quietly. To them. Do you know what that means? Myrina said something about blood-marked births. The boundary pillars were erected 3 centuries ago by the first wolves. They're key to detect threats, yes, but also to detect catalysts. Individuals or events that will fundamentally alter pack law. His fingers drummed once against the armrest. 93 years ago, they burned red for a single child. That child grew up to unify the northern territories and end the clan wars. Vaelira's breath caught. You. His expression didn't change. I was the threat my family almost killed. My parents understood what the pillars meant. That I would either save our people or destroy them. He leaned forward slightly. For children marked the same way? That's not a shift in power. That's a revolution. I don't want a revolution. I just want them to live. What you want is irrelevant. What they represent will reshape everything. Draeven stood. Which is why I'm making a decision that will likely start a civil war. Her heart hammered. What decision? The citadel was built with suppression wards. Ancient magic designed to prevent abnormal succession patterns, to maintain hierarchical stability. His jaw tightened. Those wards are killing your children. Slowly. I can feel it. Vaelira's hands flew to her stomach. What? The babies are strong, but the citadel's foundations are actively rejecting them. You have perhaps 3 weeks before the pregnancy fails. He moved toward the door. So I'm ordering the citadel reforged. Every suppression seal stripped. Every ward rewritten to protect instead of constrain. That's impossible. A structure this size will take every stone mage in Frosthaven working around the clock. Draeven's hand rested on the door handle. And will cost me the loyalty of half my nobles. Why? The word burst from her. Why would you do this for me? He looked back at her, and for just a moment, something almost human crossed his face. Because 93 years ago, someone made the same choice for me. And I've spent my entire life proving it was the right one. His eyes hardened again. Rest. You'll need your strength. He left without another word. Vaelira sat alone in the enormous room, 4 lives dancing inside her, and tried to understand the king who'd just gambled his kingdom on children that weren't even his. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Reforge the citadel? Have you lost your mind? Archduke Sorrel Vare stood from his seat, his handsome face twisted with barely controlled rage. Do you understand what you're proposing? Draeven sat at the head of the massive stone table, surrounded by 20 of Frosthaven's most powerful nobles. His expression was carved from ice. I understand perfectly. The suppression wards are foundational. Lady Corrine, a silver-haired wolf who controlled the southern territories, slammed her hand on the table. They've maintained pack stability for 300 years. Without them, every Omega with ambition will start producing oversized litters to seize power. Oversimplification, Draeven said coldly. The wards don't prevent ambition. They prevent natural evolution. Sorrel's laugh was sharp and bitter. Natural? For heirs from an Omega is an abomination, not evolution. It violates every principle of hierarchical balance. It violates your comfort, Draeven corrected. There's a difference. Lord Marcus, commander of the Eastern Guard, leaned forward. My king, even if we set aside the philosophical debate, the practical concerns are insurmountable. Rewriting wards of that magnitude will take months. During which time, the citadel will be vulnerable. Our enemies will see it as weakness. Let them. Draeven's voice could have frozen the sun. Any wolf foolish enough to attack Frosthaven while I still draw breath can test that theory personally. Sorrel circled the table slowly, his movements predatory. This isn't about military strength. It's about precedent. If you tear down the wards for one pregnant Omega, you're announcing that ancient law means nothing. That any outsider can stumble to our borders and demand we reshape our entire civilization. I'm announcing that power doesn't require suppression to maintain itself. Draeven stood, and every wolf in the room felt the weight of his dominance. If Frosthaven's hierarchy is so fragile it requires magical constraints to survive, then perhaps it deserves to fall. The silence was absolute. Lady Corrine recovered first. You're talking about destabilizing the entire Northern Alliance. The other territories won't accept this. They'll see it as Frosthaven abandoning the old ways. The old ways included burning children alive because they represented change. Draeven's words were quiet, lethal. I won't defend that. Sorrel's eyes narrowed. This is about you. About what happened to you as a child. Watch your next words carefully, Archduke. But Sorrel pressed forward, sensing blood. You nearly died because the suppression wards rejected you. Now you see yourself in this Omega's spawn, and you're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. Draeven moved so fast 3 nobles flinched. He didn't touch Sorrel, but he stood close enough that the Archduke had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. My judgment, Draeven said softly, ended the clan wars. Unified 5 territories. And built Frosthaven into the most powerful kingdom in the north. Question it again, and you'll find yourself governing a very small plot of frozen dirt. Sorrel held his gaze for 3 heartbeats, then looked away. Draeven stepped back. The decision is made. Stone mages begin work tomorrow. Anyone who interferes will be charged with treason. And if the Omega's former pack comes for her? Lady Corrine asked. If Obsidian Fong demands her return under pack law? Then they'll learn what happens when wolves mistake my patience for weakness. Lord Marcus cleared his throat. My king, there's another consideration. If the children survive, if they're born healthy, what then? For blood-marked heirs with no clear parentage, no pack affiliation. The succession questions alone will be addressed when they're born, not before. Sorrel laughed coldly. You're protecting them now, but what happens when they grow? When 4 wolves marked by destiny start competing for power in your kingdom, you think you can control that? Draeven's smile was a predator's warning. I don't need to control destiny, Archduke. I just need to survive it. Something I've had considerably more practice at than you. He turned and walked toward the exit. This meeting is over. Get out. The nobles filed out in tense silence. Sorrel lingered last, his expression calculating. You're making enemies, Draeven. I've had enemies since birth. I'm still here. They're not. Sorrel's jaw tightened, but he left without another word. Alone in the council chamber, Draeven stood before the massive windows overlooking his kingdom. Snow fell in thick curtains, covering everything in white. His closest advisor, Commander Talia of the Argent Guard, emerged from the shadows where she'd been standing silent witness. Half the council will move against you, she said quietly. Sorrel is already building alliances. I know. The Omega. Is she worth civil war? Draeven was quiet for a long moment. The children are marked. That makes them Frosthaven's future whether the nobles like it or not. I can suppress that truth and watch history repeat itself, or I can adapt. And the Omega herself? He thought of Vaelira's exhausted face, the way she'd offered her own life without hesitation to save children who didn't yet have names. She's stronger than she knows. That kind of strength is rare. Talia studied him with knowing eyes. You're protecting her. Not just the children. Her. She's a refugee under my authority. I protect what's mine. Is she yours? Draeven's expression hardened. Don't. I've served you for 20 years. I've never seen you gamble the kingdom like this. Then perhaps it was time. He turned from the window. Double the guard around her quarters. No one enters without my explicit permission. And Talia. Yes, my king. Start investigating Sorrel's recent communications. If he's moving against me, I want to know before he makes his play. Talia bowed and vanished back into the shadows. Draeven stood alone, the weight of his choices settling onto shoulders that had carried kingdoms before. Outside, the first stone mages arrived at the citadel's foundations and began the dangerous work of unmaking 3 centuries of magical law. And in a warm room 3 floors above, Vaelira felt the babies shift and settle, their heartbeats growing stronger by the hour. She didn't know yet that her survival had just triggered a war. The reforging began at dawn. Vaelira woke to the sound of chanting. Deep, rhythmic voices that made the very stones vibrate. She struggled out of bed, wrapping a fur robe around her swollen form, and moved to the window. Below in the courtyard, 50 stone mages worked in concentric circles. Their hands moved in complex patterns, pulling magic from the earth itself. Sections of the citadel's foundation glowed white-hot as ancient wards were carefully dissolved. Impressive, isn't it? She spun to find Myrina entering with a breakfast tray. I didn't hear you knock. I did. You were transfixed. The healer set the tray down and moved beside her at the window. They'll work in shifts for weeks. It's delicate work. Remove the wards too quickly and the entire structure collapses. Too slowly and the old magic fights back. Vaelira touched her stomach. Myrina, why is he doing this? You'd have to ask him. But I can tell you what I've observed. The old woman's eyes were distant with memory. Draeven was born during a blood moon. The only child of the previous High King. The pillars burned red the moment he drew breath, and the citadel's suppression wards tried to kill him. For 3 years, he was sickly, weak, barely surviving. His parents had a choice: exile him to save the kingdom's stability, or tear down the wards and risk everything. They chose him. His mother did. Against every advisor's counsel. She ordered the partial removal of wards around the royal wing. Myrina's voice softened. She died in the process. The magical backlash was too severe. But Draeven survived. Grew strong. Became exactly what the pillars predicted, a king who would reshape the north. Vaelira's throat tightened. He's reliving his own childhood. Perhaps. Or perhaps he simply understands that some lives are worth the risk. Myrina gestured to the tray. Eat. All 4 of you need strength. Over the following days, Vaelira felt the change. The oppressive weight she hadn't even realized was crushing her began to lift. The babies moved more freely, their kicks stronger and more coordinated. Her own body responded, color returning to her skin, strength flowing back into her limbs. But outside her window, tensions escalated. She watched nobles arrive and depart with furious expressions. Heard raised voices echoing through stone corridors. Felt the citadel itself dividing into factions. On the 7th day, Draeven visited again. He entered without knocking, a habit that should have annoyed her but somehow didn't. He carried himself differently here, she noticed. Still commanding, still dangerous, but fractionally less guarded. You're healing. He noted it with satisfaction. Thanks to you. Vaelira set down the book she'd been reading. The work outside, it's because of me. Because of them. It's because of necessity. Your nobles don't see it that way. Draeven moved to the window, watching the mages work. My nobles see threats to their comfortable power structures. They always have. I heard shouting yesterday. In the East Wing. Archduke Sorrel making his displeasure known. Draeven's tone was dismissive. He'll adjust or be replaced. Vaelira studied his profile, the hard lines of his face, the absolute certainty in his bearing. You're not afraid of civil war. I've survived 3 already. But you've never started one deliberately. That made him look at her, really look, and she saw the flash of surprise in his ice blue eyes. You think I'm being reckless, he said. I think you're gambling everything on children you don't know. On me. A stranger. She stood carefully, her hand supporting her belly. And I don't understand why. Draeven was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, almost thoughtful. Do you know what the worst part of my childhood was? Not the pain. Not the weakness. It was watching my mother die knowing she chose me over safety. Over stability. Over everything reasonable. His jaw tightened. For years, I thought she was foolish. That sentiment had killed her. Then I took the throne and realized something. What? Every great change in history required someone to choose the unreasonable path. To look at impossible odds and move forward anyway. He turned to face her fully. My mother wasn't foolish. She was brave. And she was right. Vaelira felt tears prick her eyes. I never wanted to change anything. I just wanted them to live. I know. But wanting and reality are different things. He moved closer, and she realized how tall he truly was, how his presence seemed to fill the entire room. Those children will be born. They will grow. And they will reshape pack law whether anyone wants it or not. I'm simply choosing to adapt rather than resist. And if adapting destroys your kingdom, then it wasn't strong enough to survive the future anyway. The absolute conviction in his voice should have been terrifying. Instead, Vaelira found it strangely comforting. The Obsidian Fong Pack, she said quietly. They requested an audience. What did you tell them? That I'm still considering their petition. But you'll refuse? Draeven's smile was sharp and cold. I'll invite them to present their case in person. In front of the full court. Where they'll have to publicly argue why murdering pregnant refugees is just. Vaelira's eyes widened. You're going to humiliate them. I'm going to make them own their cruelty. There's a difference. He moved toward the door. Rest. In 3 days, there's a formal gathering. You'll attend. What? No. I can't. You can and will. His tone brooked no argument. The nobles need to see you. Not as an abstract threat, but as a person. Someone real. It makes you harder to kill. The bluntness of it stole her breath. Draeven paused at the door. And Vaelira? Don't mistake my protection for weakness. I'm keeping you safe because it serves my purposes. Remember that. He left before she could respond. But she'd seen the lie in his eyes. He was protecting her because somewhere beneath all that ice and stone, there was still a child who remembered what it meant to be marked for death simply for existing. And that child had grown into a king who refused to let history repeat itself. Make sure you're subscribed because the next part is where everything explodes. Drop a like if you're Team Draeven and comment if you think Vaelira can trust him. Chapter 2. The formal gathering took place in Frosthaven's Great Hall, a cathedral-like space carved from black stone and silver veins. 300 wolves filled the chamber. Nobles, guards, merchants, and common pack members all crowded together under vaulted ceilings, painted with constellations. Vaelira stood in a side chamber, dressed in robes Myrina had brought her. Deep blue wool embroidered with silver thread, elegant but not ostentatious. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the fabric over her swollen belly. Breathe, Myrina said gently. You're not on trial. It feels like I am. You're being presented. There's a difference. The door opened and Commander Talia entered. The Argent Guard commander wore full ceremonial armor, her white hair braided with silver wire. It's time. Her voice was professional but not unkind. Stay close to me. Don't speak unless directly addressed. And whatever happens, don't show fear. Vaelira's laugh was shaky. I'm terrified. Then pretend you're not. These wolves can smell weakness 3 rooms away. They walked through stone corridors that gradually filled with sound. Voices, arguments, the rustle of hundreds of bodies packed into one space. The great hall doors stood 20 feet tall, carved with scenes of ancient battles. 2 guards pushed them open. The noise hit like a physical wave. Vaelira stepped into the hall and 300 pairs of eyes turned toward her. The conversations died away in ripples, silence spreading from the entrance to the far end where Draeven sat on a throne of black stone and wolf skulls. He wore a crown today. Obsidian and silver, ancient and terrible. His eyes found hers across the distance, and something in his expression steadied her. Talia led her down the central aisle. Nobles whispered behind jeweled hands. Common wolves stared with open curiosity. She felt their judgment like blades against her skin. Pregnant. Omega. Outsider. Unnatural. She lifted her chin and kept walking. They reached the base of the throne dais. Talia bowed. Vaelira followed her lead, the motion awkward with her belly. Draeven stood, and the entire hall fell into absolute silence. Wolves of Frosthaven. His voice carried to every corner without effort. You know why we're gathered. 3 weeks ago, a refugee crossed our borders during Hunt Moon. Normally, such intrusion would be met with execution. But circumstances demanded a different response. He descended the dais steps with predatory grace. Vaelira Nyx carries 4 children, blood-marked by the same magic that recognized my own birth. The boundary pillars confirmed what healers have verified. These heirs represent a fundamental shift in pack law and dominance structure. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Draeven continued, his tone allowing no interruption. I've ordered the Citadel reforged to protect them. This decision has created controversy. Some call it reckless. Others call it treason against tradition. He stopped beside Vaelira, close enough that she felt the heat of his presence. I call it survival. Archduke Sorrel stood from his position among the nobles. My king, with respect, the wolves deserve to hear the full truth. This Omega fled her pack after violating their laws. She carries children whose father she claims is dead, with no verification. We're reshaping our entire civilization for a stranger with no proven allegiance to Frosthaven. Draeven's smile was sharp. Are you questioning my judgment, Archduke? I'm questioning the precedent. If any refugee can demand we tear down ancient wards. She demanded nothing. I chose to act. Draeven's voice dropped to something dangerous. But since you mention her former pack, let's address that directly. The Obsidian Fang wolves have requested an audience. I've granted it. They're waiting outside. Shall we hear their case? Sorrel's expression flickered with satisfaction. He'd been expecting this, Vaelira realized. He thought the pack's testimony would undermine her. Draeven gestured to the guards. Bring them in. The great hall doors opened again. Kael entered first, flanked by 6 Obsidian Fang warriors. Vaelira's heart clenched. She knew every face. Had hunted beside them, laughed with them, trusted them. Kael's eyes found hers, and the hatred there was absolute. They approached the dais and bowed minimally to Draeven. Hi King, Kael said. Thank you for hearing us. State your purpose. We've come to reclaim pack property. The Omega Vaelira Nyx violated our laws by carrying an abomination. Under ancient pack rights, she belongs to Obsidian Fang justice. Abomination. Draeven's tone was deceptively mild. Explain. Kael straightened. For heirs from an Omega destabilizes the dominance hierarchy. It suggests corruption. An unnatural birth that will cascade into pack-wide chaos. Our elders studied the signs and determined the only solution was culling. Culling. Draeven let the word hang in the air. You mean murder. We mean necessary removal of a threat to pack stability. Draeven stepped forward and Kael instinctively stepped back despite himself. Tell me, Draeven said quietly, did you study the historical texts? The ones documenting every blood-marked birth in the last 5 centuries. Kael hesitated. We consulted our elders. Not what I asked. Did you personally study the historical record? No, but... Then allow me to educate you. Draeven's voice rose to fill the hall. Blood-marked births occur once every 3 to 4 generations. Every single one has preceded major advancements in pack law, the end of the culling wars, the establishment of neutral territories, the unification of the northern clans. These births don't destabilize civilization. They evolve it. He turned to address the entire gathering. Your elders didn't fear instability. They feared change. They feared losing control. So they chose murder and called it justice. Kael's face flushed. You don't understand our pack's internal. I understand cowardice perfectly. Draeven's words cracked like a whip. You killed her mate. Hunted her through a blizzard. Would have murdered 4 unborn children because your hierarchy is so fragile it can't survive natural evolution. The hall was utterly silent. Vaelira stood frozen, watching Draeven systematically dismantle her former pack's justifications. She'd never had anyone defend her like this. Never had someone stand between her and violence without hesitation. Kael's hands clenched into fists. Those children will destroy the balance. The balance was already broken if it required murder to maintain. Draeven moved back to the dais, his presence dominating the entire space. Vaelira Nyx is under Frosthaven's protection. Her children are under Frosthaven's protection. Any attempt to harm them will be considered an act of war against my kingdom. Are we clear? Kael's jaw worked. You're making a mistake. I've made many. I'm still here. Your pack's previous leader who challenged me. Draeven's smile was arctic. Isn't. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Kael bowed stiffly. We will report your decision to our elders. Do that. And tell them if they come for her, they won't leave my territory alive. The Obsidian Fang wolves retreated, their fury barely contained. After the doors closed, Draeven addressed the gathering one final time. Let this be clear to everyone present. Frosthaven doesn't vow to fear. We don't murder children because they represent change. We adapt. We evolve. Or we die. His eyes swept the crowd. Anyone uncomfortable with that philosophy is free to seek territory elsewhere. No one moved. Good. This gathering is concluded. The nobles filed out in tense silence. Common wolves lingered, staring at Vaelira with new expressions. Not hostility. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. When the hall finally emptied, only Vaelira, Draeven, and Talia remained. Vaelira's legs felt weak. You just threatened war with Obsidian Fang. I made a promise, Draeven corrected. They decide if it becomes war. Your nobles are furious. They'll adjust. She laughed, slightly hysterical. You're impossible. Frequently. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment his expression softened almost imperceptibly. You handled yourself well. I didn't say a word. Exactly. You let your presence speak. Showed them you're not a threat. Just someone trying to survive. He turned toward the exit. Rest. The hard part is coming. That wasn't the hard part? His smile was grim. That was politics. What's coming is war. The assassination attempt came on the 20th night. Vaelira awoke to pressure against her throat. Cold steel. A blade held by steady hands. Her eyes snapped open to find a figure in dark clothing crouched over her bed, face covered by a mask. The assassin's other hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream. Don't move, a female voice whispered. This can be quick or slow. Your choice. Vaelira's heart hammered. The babies kicked frantically inside her, sensing her terror. Her hands moved instinctively to protect her belly. The assassin's blade pressed harder. The children die tonight. We're being merciful. You can die with them or after. Which do you prefer? Vaelira bit down on the hand, covering her mouth with every ounce of strength she had. The assassin jerked back with a muffled curse, and Vaelira rolled off the bed, hitting the floor hard. Pain exploded through her side, but she scrambled toward the door, screaming. Guards! Help! The assassin recovered fast, moving with trained precision. The blade flashed toward Vaelira's exposed back, and met Talia's sword instead. The Argent Guard commander materialized from the shadows where she'd apparently been stationed all along, her blade deflecting the killing blow. 2 more guards burst through the door. The assassin tried to retreat, but Talia was faster. She disarmed the intruder with brutal efficiency and slammed them against the wall, ripping off the mask. A young woman. Noble features. Eyes full of fanatical certainty. Lady Kareen's niece, Talia said coldly. Of course. The girl spat blood. The abominations have to die. They'll destroy everything. The only thing dying tonight is your family's political future. Talia gestured to her guards. Take her to the dungeons. Full interrogation protocols. As they dragged the assassin away, Draeven appeared in the doorway. He took in the scene instantly, Vaelira on the floor, trembling and pregnant, Talia's bloody sword, the overturned furniture. His expression went absolutely glacial. Status, he said to Talia. 1 assassin. Neutralized. Vaelira is unharmed. The children's heartbeats are strong. Draeven moved to Vaelira and knelt beside her without hesitation. His hands, so capable of violence, were gentle as they helped her sit up. Are you hurt? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Can you stand? Another nod. He lifted her as easily as he had in the blizzard weeks ago and carried her to the bed. Myrina rushed in moments later, her healer's bag already in hand. Out, she ordered everyone. All of you except Talia. Draeven didn't move. I'm staying. Myrina glared at him. My king. I said I'm staying. The old healer recognized a movable will when she saw it. She gestured him to the corner. Then stay quiet. She examined Vaelira with practiced efficiency, checking heartbeats, looking for injuries, monitoring the baby's movements. After 10 tense minutes, she stepped back. No damage. The fall bruised your hip but didn't harm the children. You were lucky. Vaelira's laugh was broken. Lucky. Draeven's voice cut through from the corner. Who authorized the guard rotation tonight? Talia's expression darkened. Lord Marcus. He claimed you'd approved a schedule change. I approved nothing. I know. I stationed myself in her room anyway when the new rotation seemed suspicious. Good instincts. Draeven's jaw tightened. Marcus is working with Sorrel. This was coordinated. They tried to kill the babies, Vaelira whispered. That girl, she said they're abominations. That girl is a fanatic following orders from cowards. Draeven moved to the window, looking out at his snow-covered kingdom. This ends now. My king. Talia's voice was careful. Arrest Lady Corrine, Lord Marcus, and Archduke Sorrel. Charges of conspiracy to commit murder. Full tribunal tomorrow. Draeven. Myrina's tone was warning. Arresting an archduke without absolute proof. The proof is bleeding on my floor. He turned, and his eyes were colder than Vaelira had ever seen them. They wanted war. They'll get it. He left without another word, his presence somehow making the room feel emptier. Myrina helped Vaelira change into clean robes, her movements gentle. You should have been better protected. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. It's all our faults. We brought you into this viper's nest and expected you to be safe. The old healer's eyes were haunted. Draeven is about to tear the nobility apart. There will be blood. To protect me? To prove a point. That in Frosthaven, his word is absolute law. That challenging him has consequences. Myrina sat on the edge of the bed. But yes, also to protect you. Vaelira touched her belly, feeling the 4 heartbeats gradually calming. Why does he care this much? Because you're a mirror, Myrina said quietly. You're everything he was. Hunted. Marked for death. Deemed unnatural simply for existing. Protecting you lets him rewrite his own childhood. Save the version of himself he couldn't save then. That's not fair to him. Making me his redemption. Life rarely is. Myrina stood. Rest. Tomorrow's tribunal will be brutal. But Vaelira couldn't rest. She lay in the dark, replaying the feel of cold steel against her throat, the assassin's certainty that murdering children was righteous. And she thought of Draeven's frozen rage, the way he'd lifted her like she was something precious. No one had ever fought for her before. She wasn't sure how to carry that weight. The tribunal took place in the throne room at dawn. Every noble in Frosthaven was required to attend. They filled the chamber in tense clusters, whispering behind hands, watching Draeven with wary eyes. Lady Corrine, Lord Marcus, and Archduke Sorrel stood in chains before the throne. The indignity of it was calculated and deliberate. Draeven sat in judgment, his crown catching the cold morning light. You stand accused of conspiracy to commit murder, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly. Specifically, the murder of Vaelira, Nyx, and her unborn children. How do you answer? Sorrel lifted his chin. This tribunal is illegal. An archduke cannot be tried without approval from the Council of Territories. You can when the crime occurred in my citadel, against someone under my direct protection. Draeven's tone allowed no argument. Answer the charge. We acted to preserve Frosthaven's stability, Lady Corrine said. Those children represent an existential threat to Pack law. So you admit to ordering the assassination. I admit to recognizing necessity. Something you've apparently forgotten. Draeven's smile was terrible. I've forgotten nothing. Including the fact that 300 years ago, nobles like you tried to kill me for the same reason. My mother stopped them. Died protecting me. And I swore on her grave that no child under my protection would ever face that threat again. He stood, descending from the throne with lethal grace. You didn't just attack Vaelira. You attacked my oath, my authority, my kingdom. He stopped directly in front of Sorrel. And now you'll face the consequences. Sorrel's composure cracked slightly. You can't execute an archduke. The political backlash. I can do whatever I want. I'm the king. Draeven turned to address the entire gathering. But I'm not unreasonable. You have a choice. Confess fully. Name every conspirator, every bribe, every secret communication. And I'll exile you instead of executing you. Exile. Marcus looked desperate. For how long? Forever. You leave Frosthaven tonight and never return. Your titles are stripped. Your lands redistributed. Your names erased from the noble registry. Draeven's eyes swept all three. Or you can maintain your pride and die before sunset. Decide. The silence stretched. Finally, Sorrel spoke, his voice bitter. I'll confess. Fully. The interrogation took hours. By the time it concluded, 7 more nobles were implicated, including 2 high-ranking military commanders. The conspiracy went deeper than even Draeven had suspected. As the sun set, 11 former nobles rode out of Frosthaven in disgrace, their families ruined, their power destroyed. Draeven watched them go from the battlements to Leah beside him. You've made permanent enemies, she said quietly. I've removed cancers. They'll try to return, and I'll kill them then. He looked at her. How is Vaelira? Shaken, but recovering. Myrina says the babies are fine. Good. Draeven. Talia's voice was careful. The Omega. You're protecting her like she's Pack. Like she's yours. The wolves are starting to notice. Let them notice. If you claim her formally. I'm not discussing this. You're the king. Everything you do is political. If you claim an Omega as yours, especially one carrying blood-marked children. She's not mine. Draeven's voice was hard. She's under my protection. There's a difference. Talia studied him with knowing eyes. Is there? He didn't answer. In her chambers, Vaelira stood at the window watching the disgraced nobles disappear into the distance. She pressed her hand against the glass, feeling the cold. 11 lives destroyed. Because of her. Because of the children inside her. A knock at the door. Come in. Draeven entered, and somehow the room felt smaller with him in it. You should be resting, he said. I've been resting for hours. I needed to stand. She didn't turn from the window. 11 people exiled. Because they tried to kill me. Because they committed treason. It's the same thing. It's not. He moved beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. They chose their actions. You're just surviving. Your kingdom is tearing itself apart. My kingdom was already fractured. This is just exposing the cracks. He was quiet for a moment. Do you regret coming here? Vaelira thought about it honestly. No. I'd be dead otherwise. So would they. She touched her belly. But I hate that people are suffering because of me. People are suffering because they chose power over compassion. That's not your fault. She finally turned to look at him. Why are you doing this? Really? Not the political reasons. The real reason. Draeven met her eyes, and for once, his expression wasn't guarded. Because someone has to prove that marked children don't have to die to keep the world comfortable. Because I'm tired of watching fear dictate policy. Because he stopped jaw-tightening. Because you remind me that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to give up when everything wants you to. Vaelira's breath caught. They stood in silence, the moment stretching between them like something fragile. Finally, Draeven stepped back. The citadel reforging is complete. The wards are rewritten. You're safe now. As safe as I can make you. Thank you. He nodded once and turned to leave. Draeven? He paused at the door. I don't regret meeting you either. Something flickered in his eyes, too quick to identify. Then he was gone. Vaelira stood alone, for lives dancing inside her, and wondered when protection had started feeling like something else entirely. 3 weeks passed in uneasy peace. The citadel settled into new rhythms. Stone mages completed the final ward adjustments. Nobles who'd survived the purge walked carefully, aware they were being watched. Common wolves began treating Vaelira with cautious respect rather than suspicion. She grew stronger daily. The babies thrived in the reforged citadel, their movements vigorous and coordinated. Myrina estimated 2 more weeks until birth. Draeven left on the 23rd day. Eastern Rebellion, Talia explained during her morning visit. 3 minor territories refusing to pay tribute. The king has to make an appearance or they'll think he's weak. Vaelira tried to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. How long will he be gone? Week. Maybe 2 if they're stupid enough to actually fight. Will they? Talia's smile was sharp. Doubtful. Draeven doesn't lose battles. But the citadel felt different without him. Colder. Less certain. Vaelira spent her days reading in the library, walking the gardens when weather permitted, and talking to the babies. She'd started giving them tentative names in her mind, though she didn't speak them aloud yet. It felt too presumptuous. Like claiming a future she hadn't earned. On the 5th night of Draeven's absence, the dreams began. She woke gasping, her body drenched in sweat. The babies were agitated, kicking frantically. Her belly felt tight, wrong somehow. Myrina appeared within minutes, somehow sensing distress. What is it? The healer's hands moved over Vaelira's stomach, feeling the tension. I don't know. Something's wrong. They're afraid. Of what? I don't know. Myrina's expression grew concerned. Your body's preparing for labor. It's too early, but it started. The babies are reacting to the change. How early? 2 weeks. Normally survivable, but with quadruplets, she didn't finish the thought. I'm staying with you tonight. We need to monitor this carefully. But as the night wore on, Vaelira's sense of dread intensified. It wasn't just labor. It was something else. Something external. She stood at the window, looking out at the dark forest beyond the citadel walls. And saw lights. Dozens of them. Moving through the trees. Torches. Myrina, she whispered. Look. The healer joined her at the window, and her face went pale. That's an army. Alarms began ringing through the citadel. Talia burst into the room minutes later, fully armed. We're under siege. Obsidian Fong and 3 allied packs. Over 200 wolves. They're demanding we surrender you. Vaelira's hands went to her belly. They came for me. They came for war. Talia's expression was grim. But our walls are strong and we have superior numbers. We can hold until Draeven returns. How long until he can get back? 4 days if we send runners now. We don't have 4 days. Myrina's voice was tight. Vaelira's in early labor. The stress could kill the babies. Talia swore viciously. Can you stop it? Not if we're under active siege. Fear and adrenaline will only accelerate the process. Outside, war horns blew. Talia moved to the window. They're positioning for assault. They'll hit the east gate first, try to overwhelm it with numbers. She turned back. I need to go command the defense. Myrina, keep her calm. That's our priority. She left at a run. Vaelira sank onto the bed, trying to control her breathing. The babies kicked in distress. Her body was betraying her, preparing to deliver them too soon, in the middle of a siege. This is my fault, she whispered. This is their fault, Myrina corrected firmly. They chose violence. You chose survival. Remember that. The first assault began an hour later. Vaelira heard it even from deep inside the citadel, the clash of weapons, the howls of combat, the screams of the wounded. The wall shook as battering rams pounded the gates. Her contractions started just before dawn. Not strong yet, but unmistakable. Her body was committed now. Myrina worked with desperate efficiency, preparing the room, gathering supplies, sending for the other healers who specialized in difficult births. Talk to them, she instructed Vaelira. The babies. Tell them to wait. Tell them their father, she stopped. Tell them the king is coming. Vaelira's hands pressed against her belly. Please wait, she whispered. Just a little longer. Please. But children don't negotiate. The contractions intensified throughout the day. Outside, the siege raged. Talia sent hourly updates. The east gate was holding, but barely. The attackers had siege ladders now. Hand-to-hand combat on the walls. Casualties mounting on both sides. They're not trying to breach, one messenger reported. They're trying to wear us down. Like they know we're racing against time. Because they did know, Vaelira realized. Somehow, Obsidian Fong knew she was in labor. Knew the babies were coming early. This wasn't just a siege. It was a countdown to murder. Night fell. Vaelira's labor intensified to the point where she couldn't walk, could barely think. Myrina and 3 other healers surrounded her, preparing for a birth that shouldn't happen yet. The first one is breach, Myrina said grimly. We're going to have to turn them manually. The pain was extraordinary. Vaelira screamed as the healers worked, their hands somehow inside her, trying to rotate a child that wasn't ready to be born. The other 3 babies pressed against her ribs, her lungs, everything. I can't, she gasped. I can't do this. You can and you will. Myrina's voice was iron. These children are fighters. They're not giving up. Neither are you. Outside, the battle reached a crescendo. Enemy wolves breached the outer courtyard. The Argent Guard fought them back in brutal close combat. Blood stained the snow red. Talia appeared in the doorway, her armor dented and blood-stained. Status, she demanded. First child is positioned. She's pushing. Myrina didn't look up from her work. How long? Hours. Maybe more. Talia swore. We can't hold hours. They're throwing everything at the walls. It's like they know. They do know. Vaelira's voice was ragged with pain. Someone told them. Someone inside the citadel. The 2 women looked at each other. We didn't find all the conspirators, Talia said slowly. Some are still hidden. Another contraction hit, and Vaelira lost the ability to speak. The hours blurred into agony. She pushed when Myrina told her to, breathed when instructed, existed in a haze of pain and desperation while outside, wolves died defending her. Then, just before midnight, everything changed. The battle sounds shifted. The howls of attackers turned to screams of fear. New war horns blew. Deeper. More terrible. Talia appeared again, and this time she was smiling. He's back. Vaelira's eyes widened through the pain. Draeven? Rode 3 days without stopping. Brought the entire northern cavalry. Talia's grin was feral. The siege is about to become a massacre. And outside, Vaelira heard it. A howl that shook the very stones of the citadel. Draeven's war cry. The sound of absolute fury unleashed. The attacking wolves broke and ran. They'd come for slaughter and found a king instead. Draeven's forces cut through them like a blade through water. No mercy. No hesitation. Just brutal, efficient violence. Within an hour, the siege was over. And Vaelira was still in labor. Draeven burst into the room still covered in blood from battle. He took in the scene instantly, Vaelira on the bed, surrounded by healers, clearly in agony. Status, he demanded. First child crowning, Myrina said. The others are positioned. But she's exhausted. I don't know if she has the strength. She has it. Draeven moved to Vaelira's side and took her hand. His grip was firm, grounding. You survived a blizzard. You survived assassination. You'll survive this. Vaelira looked at him through tears. You came back. I told you I'd protect them. I keep my promises. Another contraction hit, and she screamed. Push, Myrina commanded. Now. All your strength. Vaelira pushed, Draeven's hand the only thing anchoring her to reality. And finally, miraculously, the first child slid free. A daughter. She didn't cry immediately, and Vaelira's heart stopped. Then the baby howled. A sound of pure fury at being born too early into a world at war. Myrina cleaned her quickly, wrapped her in soft cloth, and the baby's eyes opened. Crimson. Marked. 1 down, Myrina said. 3 to go. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. You need to see how this ends. Like this video if you're on the edge of your seat, and comment your name predictions for these 4 fighters. The second child came easier. A son, smaller than his sister but no less fierce. His eyes opened crimson too, and his tiny fists clenched as though already preparing for battle. Vaelira barely had time to catch her breath before the third child demanded entry. Another daughter. This one screamed the moment she was born, her voice carrying power that made even the healers flinch. Strong lungs, Myrina said with grim approval. She'll need them. 3 down. Vaelira was shaking with exhaustion, her body pushed beyond any reasonable limit. Draeven hadn't let go of her hand the entire time, his presence the only thing keeping her conscious. 1 more, he said quietly. You can do this. But the 4th child wasn't coming. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Myrina's expression grew increasingly concerned. The last one isn't positioned correctly. The cord might be compressed. Vaelira's vision blurred. What does that mean? It means we need to get this child out now or we lose them both. Myrina looked at Draeven. I need to cut. Reach in manually. It's dangerous, but there's no choice. Draeven's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Vaelira felt the blade, felt Myrina's hands inside her, impossibly deep. The pain transcended anything she'd experienced before. She heard herself screaming as though from a great distance. Then Myrina pulled, and the fourth child came free in a rush of blood. A son. Silent. Not breathing. Myrina worked frantically, clearing his airways, rubbing his tiny chest. Come on. Come on. Vaelira couldn't breathe either, her entire world focused on that tiny, still form. Draeven's hand tightened on hers. Breathe, Myrina commanded the baby. Breathe. The child's eyes snapped open. Crimson. And he howled with rage at being born, at being forced into existence, at everything. Myrina laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. For blood-marked heirs. Impossible. She wrapped the fourth child and placed all four on Vaelira's chest. 2 daughters. 2 sons. Each marked with eyes that glowed faintly crimson in the low light. Vaelira looked down at them, tears streaming down her face. Hi, she whispered. I'm your mother. I'm sorry you were born into war. I'm sorry for everything. But you're here. You're alive. And I'll never let anyone hurt you. The babies settled against her warmth, their cries softening to small sounds of contentment. Draeven stood beside the bed, looking down at the 5 of them. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes had shifted. They're beautiful, he said quietly. They're terrifying, Myrina corrected, cleaning her instruments. For blood-marked children born during a siege under a waning blood moon? The old prophecies will go mad trying to interpret this. Let them. Draeven's voice was firm. These children are Frosthavens now. Under my protection. Anyone who threatens them answers to me. Talia appeared in the doorway. My king. We've secured the perimeter. The remaining attackers fled into the forest. We captured 17, including she paused. You should see this. Draeven looked at Vaelira. Will you be all right? She nodded, too exhausted for words. He left with Talia, and Myrina helped Vaelira shift into a more comfortable position with the babies nestled safely. Sleep, the healer commanded. I'll watch over them. Vaelira tried to resist, but her body had reached its absolute limit. She fell into unconsciousness with 4 small heartbeats pressed against her own. In the courtyard, Draeven found the captured wolves kneeling in the snow under heavy guard. But the 17th captive made him stop cold. Lord Peter, one of his own high-ranking nobles. A wolf he'd trusted with military intelligence. Explain, Draeven said, his voice lethal. Peter raised his head, and there was no remorse in his eyes. The Omega had to die. The children had to die. I sent word to Obsidian Fong about her condition. Coordinated the timing of their attack. You betrayed your king. Your kingdom. For what? For the preservation of order. Those children will destroy everything we've built. Draeven crouched down to eye level with the traitor. You're right. They will destroy everything. Everything corrupt. Everything built on fear and suppression. Everything that requires murder to maintain itself. He stood. But you won't live to see it. You can't execute me without trial. I can do whatever I want. I'm the king. Draeven turned to Talia. Execution at dawn. Public. All 17. I want every wolf in Frosthaven to watch what happens to traitors. Peter's composure cracked. Draeven, please. You tried to murder children hours after their birth. There is no mercy for you. He walked away without another word. That night, Draeven stood alone on the battlements, looking out at his blood-stained kingdom. The snow was falling again, slowly covering the evidence of battle. Talia joined him after a while. The Omega and children are stable, she reported. Myrina says they'll all survive. Good. 17 executions tomorrow. The nobles are whispering that you've become tyrant. Let them whisper. Draeven. Talia's voice was careful. You've changed. Since she arrived. Since the children were born, the king I knew would have calculated political costs, would have considered exile instead of execution, The king you knew watched his mother die protecting him and spent 30 years making sure it never happened again. Draeven's voice was quiet but firm. Those children represent everything I was, everything I fought to become. If protecting them makes me a tyrant, so be it. And the Omega? Vaelira. He was silent for a long moment. She's pack, he finally said. She and the children. They're mine now. Frosthaven's. Yours personally or Frosthaven's collectively? Does it matter? It does if you're planning to claim her formally. Draeven turned to look at his commander. I haven't decided. The wolves will expect clarification. An Omega-bearing blood-marked children, living under the king's direct protection? The rumors are all ready. I know what the rumors are. His jaw tightened. I'll address it when I'm ready. And if she has opinions on being claimed? That actually made him pause. I'll ask her, he said finally. When she's recovered. When the children are safe. When you've built enough justifications to avoid admitting you care? Talia's tone was gentle but pointed. Draeven's expression hardened. Dismissed, Commander. Talia bowed and left him alone with his thoughts and the falling snow. 3 days passed. Vaelira recovered with the resilience that had kept her alive through everything. The babies thrived despite their early arrival, nursing strongly, growing visibly. She named them on the 4th day. Lyra, the eldest daughter. Fierce and protective already. Kieran, the first son. Quiet but watchful. Sarah, the younger daughter. Loud and demanding. Talon, the youngest son. The fighter who'd refused to die. Draeven visited every day, though he never stayed long. He'd stand at the doorway and watch the children, his expression unreadable. Sometimes he'd ask questions about their health. Sometimes he'd just observe in silence. On the 7th day, Vaelira was strong enough to walk. She stood at the window, all 4 babies sleeping in the elaborate crib the Citadel's craftspeople had built. Watching the snow fall, thinking about everything that had happened. A knock at the door. Draeven entered without waiting for permission. A habit she'd stopped fighting. You're healing well, he observed. Thanks to your healers. Your protection. She turned to face him. Everything. I owe you my life. Their lives. You owe me nothing. That's not true, and you know it. Draeven moved to the crib, looking down at the 4 sleeping infants. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. They're growing fast. Blood-marked children always do. Or so Myrina tells me. Vaelira joined him at the crib. She says they'll be walking within weeks. Talking within months. That their development will be accelerated until they reach maturity. Good. They'll need every advantage. They stood in silence for a moment, both watching the children breathe. The executions, Vaelira said quietly. 17 wolves. Because of me. Because of their own choices. You're splitting hairs. I'm drawing lines. Draeven's voice was firm. They chose treason. They chose to attack children. I chose consequences. There's no moral ambiguity here. Vaelira studied his profile. You don't regret anything, do you? I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret doing it. Do you ever question yourself? Wonder if you're wrong. That made him look at her, really look. Every day, he said quietly. Every decision. Every execution. Every law. I question all of it. His jaw tightened. But questioning doesn't mean hesitating. I rule because someone has to. Because the alternative is chaos. So I make choices and live with the consequences. That sounds lonely. It is. The honesty in his voice surprised her. Vaelira reached out without thinking and touched his arm. Thank you. For saving us. For fighting for us. Her voice caught. For making me believe they deserve to live even when the whole world says otherwise. Draeven looked down at her hand on his arm, then back to her face. They don't just deserve to live, Vaelira. They deserve to thrive. To grow into whatever they're meant to become. Without fear. Without suppression. He covered her hand with his own, the gesture unexpectedly gentle. And so do you. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged. One of the babies whimpered. Sarah, demanding attention even in sleep. They both stepped back, the spell broken. I should let you rest, Draeven said. Wait. Vaelira's voice stopped him at the door. What happens now? After everything? Where do we go from here? Draeven turned, and his expression was complex. That depends. On you. On them. On what you want. I want them safe. They're safe. Here. Under my protection. Always. He paused. But you need to decide if you're staying because you have no other choice, or because you choose Frosthaven. Is there a difference? Yes. Vaelira looked at the 4 sleeping children, then back at the king who'd gambled everything to protect them. I choose to stay, she said quietly. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I trust you. Because they trust you. Because she took a breath. Because this feels like home. Something flickered in Draeven's ice blue eyes. Relief? Hope? It was gone too quickly to identify. Good, he said simply. Then welcome to Frosthaven, Vaelira Nyx. Officially. He left before she could respond. Vaelira stood alone with 4 blood-marked children and a future she couldn't begin to predict. But for the first time since discovering she was pregnant, she wasn't afraid. Chapter 3. The announcement came 2 weeks later. Draeven summoned the entire court to the Great Hall. Every noble, every guard, every citizen with status enough to attend. The chamber filled to capacity, wolves packed shoulder to shoulder, waiting. Vaelira stood in the same side chamber as before, but this time she held Lyra while Myrina managed the other 3 children. The babies were remarkably calm, as though sensing the importance of the moment. Talia appeared at the door. It's time. What exactly is happening? Vaelira asked, her heart racing. Draeven wouldn't tell me, because he wanted it to be a surprise. Talia's smile was knowing. Trust him. They walked through the corridors, the sounds of the gathered crowd growing louder. When the great hall doors opened, silence fell so completely that Vaelira heard her own heartbeat. Draeven stood at the throne, crowned and commanding. His eyes found hers across the distance, and something in his expression steadied her. She walked down the central aisle holding Lyra, Myrina following with the other 3 children in a specially designed carrier. Every eye tracked their movement. When they reached the dais, Draeven descended to meet them. Wolves of Frosthaven, he began, his voice carrying to every corner. 3 months ago, a refugee crossed our borders. Vaelira Nyx, an Omega fleeing persecution, carrying 4 unborn children marked by blood moon magic. I granted her protection despite considerable opposition. Despite threats to our stability. Despite the cost. He turned to face the crowd fully. That decision has been questioned. Challenged. Some called it weakness. Others called it madness. Today, I'm here to clarify exactly what it was. Draeven gestured to Vaelira and the children. These 4 infants are blood-marked. The first quadruplet birth of its kind in a century. The boundary pillars recognize them. Ancient magic confirmed them. They represent evolution in pack law, a fundamental shift in how dominance and hierarchy function. His expression was iron. And they are now formally under Frosthaven's protection. Not as refugees. Not as guests. As citizens with full rights and privileges. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Draeven raised his hand for silence. But more than that, I'm formally declaring them heirs of Frosthaven. The hall exploded. Nobles shouted in shock and outrage. Common wolves gasped. The noise was deafening. Vaelira stared at Draeven in absolute shock. What are you doing? He looked at her, his eyes intense. What should have been done the moment they were born? Protecting their future. You can't make them heirs. You have no children of your own, and they're not. They're mine now, Draeven said quietly, but with absolute conviction. By choice. By protection. By right of the crown. I'm claiming them as my own. Vaelira's breath stopped. The crowd's noise faded to background as she processed what he'd just said. Claiming them meant more than political protection. It meant legally adopting them. Making them his children in every way that mattered under pack law. Why? She whispered. Because they need a father who won't fear their power. Who'll teach them to use it responsibly. Who'll stand between them and anyone who wants them dead. His voice was low, meant only for her. And because I want to. Tears burned Vaelira's eyes. Draeven turned back to the crowd, raising his voice to be heard over the chaos. These children are blood-marked. That cannot be changed or denied. They will grow into power that will reshape our world. The question isn't whether that happens. The question is whether Frosthaven adapts and leads that change or resists and falls behind. He moved to stand beside Vaelira, a united front. I choose adaptation. I choose evolution. I choose these children. His gaze swept the crowd with challenge. Any wolf who disagrees is free to leave Frosthaven and seek territory elsewhere. But if you stay, you accept them. Not as threats. As the future. Lord Garrett, one of the older nobles, stood. My king, with respect, this is unprecedented. Claiming another wolf's children as heirs. Their father is dead. Murdered by the same pack that tried to kill them. I'm stepping into that void. But the bloodline implications are irrelevant. I'm not making them heirs because of blood. I'm making them heirs because of potential. Draeven's voice hardened. This is not a debate. This is a declaration. Accept it or leave. Silence fell. Then, from the back of the hall, a common wolf stepped forward. A young female with scars crossing her arms from years of labor. I accept it, she said clearly. The children should live. Should grow. Should lead if they're capable. The old ways nearly killed my daughter for being born breach. I'm done with old ways. Another wolf stood. Then another. Within minutes, half the hall was standing in support. The nobles who remained seated looked furious, but they were outnumbered and they knew it. Draeven's expression didn't change, but Vaelira saw the satisfaction in his eyes. Good, he said. Then let it be recorded. Lyra, Kieran, Sarah, and Talon Valemorn are hereby recognized as heirs of Frosthaven. Blood-marked. Protected. Honored. He took Lyra from Vaelira's arms, holding the tiny child with surprising gentleness. The baby looked up at him with crimson eyes and made a small sound of contentment. The image was powerful, a feared king holding a blood-marked infant with absolute care. The court photographer captured it, and Vaelira knew that image would spread across every territory within days. After the gathering dispersed, Draeven brought Vaelira and the children to his private study. It was the first time she'd been invited into his personal space. The room was surprisingly sparse. Books, maps, weapons. No luxury. Just function. He set Lyra down in the carrier with her siblings, then turned to face Vaelira. You're angry, he observed. You made a life-altering decision without consulting me. Would you have said no? That's not the point. Then what is? Vaelira struggled to articulate the storm of emotions. You claimed them. As yours. That makes me, she stopped. That makes you what? His voice was careful. Their mother. Under your protection. Bound to you legally and politically whether I want to be or not. Do you not want to be? The question hung between them. Vaelira looked at the 4 children sleeping peacefully, at the king who'd fought wars to protect them, at the future she'd never imagined having. I don't know, she admitted. Everything's happened so fast. 3 months ago I was running for my life. Now I'm mother to 4 heirs and living in a citadel and bound to a king I barely know. Draeven moved closer, but not close enough to crowd her. I should have asked first, he said quietly. You're right. I made assumptions. The word seemed to cost him. Sorry. Vaelira blinked. Did you just apologize? Don't make me repeat it. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Why did you really do it? She asked. The truth. Not the political answer. Draeven looked at the children, then back at her. Because watching them be born, watching you fight to bring them into the world, watching them breathe for the first time, he stopped, jaw tight. I realized I wanted to be part of that. Part of their lives. Not as a distant king offering political protection. As something more. A father. I don't know if I'll be good at it. I had a complicated relationship with my own parents. I've spent my life ruling, not nurturing. But his expression was vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I want to try. Vaelira's defenses crumbled. She stepped forward and did something that surprised both of them. She hugged him. Draeven froze for a heartbeat, then his arms came up to carefully return the embrace. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. For everything. For saving us. For claiming them. For giving them a chance. You don't need to thank me. I do. Because you didn't have to do any of this. You chose to. That matters. They stood like that for a long moment, two wolves who'd found each other in impossible circumstances, holding on to something fragile and new. When they separated, Draeven's expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. There's something else, he said. What? I'm not claiming you. Vaelira. I want to be clear about that. You're not my property or my responsibility. He struggled for words. You're your own person. Free to make your own choices. Including leaving if you want. You'd let me take the children? No. They're heirs now. They stay in Frosthaven. But he met her eyes. You can go if this life isn't what you want. I'll make sure you're provided for. Protected. But not trapped. Vaelira studied him, seeing the sincerity in his face. What if I don't want to leave? Then stay. As part of the court. The children's mother. A citizen with full rights and what? She pressed. What are we, Draeven? You and me. He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he finally admitted. But I'd like to find out. If you're willing. Vaelira looked at the 4 sleeping children, at the king who'd become their father, at the future spreading out before them like uncharted territory. I'm willing, she said quietly. Draeven's answering smile was small but genuine. Good. Outside the window, snow fell over Frosthaven, covering the blood-stained ground in fresh white. Covering the past. Making space for whatever came next. And in that moment, surrounded by children marked for greatness and a king learning to be gentle, Vaelira finally let herself believe in tomorrow. The next months transformed Frosthaven. The children grew at an accelerated rate, just as Myrina had predicted. Within 6 weeks, they were crawling. By 3 months, they took their first steps. Their crimson eyes faded to a deep red brown that only glowed when they were emotional or using their emerging abilities. Because they had abilities. Lyra could sense emotional states, reading the moods of everyone around her with uncanny accuracy. Kieran showed early signs of enhanced strength, moving furniture that should have been impossible for a child his size. Sarah had a voice that could shatter glass when she screamed in frustration. And Talon could vanish, not invisibility exactly, but something close, becoming so still and silent that eyes slid right past him. Draeven spent hours with them daily, adapting his schedule to include training sessions disguised as play, teaching them control, helping them understand their gifts without fear. Vaelira watched him transform from distant king to attentive father with something like wonder. You're good at this, she said one afternoon, watching him patiently help Kieran understand his strength by building block towers together. I'm adequate, Draeven corrected. They're patient with me. They adore you. It was true. The children lit up when Draeven entered a room, competing for his attention, showing off their latest accomplishments. He indulged them with a gentleness no one else in the Citadel ever saw. But he and Vaelira remained carefully undefined. They spent time together, yes. Talked frequently. Shared meals. Co-parented the children with increasing ease. But there was a line neither of them crossed. Until the spring gathering. It was Frosthaven's largest annual celebration, where wolves from allied territories came to renew bonds, negotiate treaties, and celebrate survival through another harsh winter. The Citadel filled with visitors, the Great Hall transformed into a festival space. Vaelira was expected to attend. Myrina helped her dress in formal robes, deep green with silver embroidery. Her hair was braided with winter flowers. She looked beautiful in a way she'd never allowed herself to consider before. When she entered the Great Hall, conversations paused. She was no longer the desperate refugee who'd collapsed at the borders. She was the mother of Frosthaven's heirs. The Omega under the High King's protection. Someone who mattered. Draeven stood at the center of a group of visiting dignitaries, but his eyes found her the moment she entered. Something flickered in his expression, appreciation, maybe more, before his political mask returned. The evening progressed with dancing, music, and the complex social navigation of pack politics. Vaelira was introduced to dozens of wolves, all carefully polite, all clearly curious about her story. Then Duke Karsten of the Western Reaches approached. He was handsome in a conventional way, tall, well-built, with easy charm and a smile that probably worked on most wolves. "Vaelira Nix," he said warmly. "I've heard extraordinary things about you." "I'm sure you have." Her tone was cautious. The Omega who tamed the Winter King, gave him heirs, changed the entire Northern Alliance. Karsten's eyes traveled over her with appreciation that made her uncomfortable. "You're more beautiful than the rumors suggested." "I didn't tame anyone. And the children are adopted, not." Of course. Forgive my crude phrasing." He moved closer. "I simply meant that you've accomplished something remarkable, capturing Draeven's attention so completely. He's been unattached for decades. Many have tried and failed. I didn't try anything, which is probably why you succeeded." Karsten smiled. "Tell me, is he as cold in private as he appears in court? Or does the ice melt behind closed doors?" Before Vaelira could formulate a response, a hand settled on her lower back. Draeven had materialized beside her, his expression pleasant, but his eyes glacial. "Karsten," he said mildly. "I see you've met Vaelira." "Indeed. We were just discussing." "I'm sure you were." "Vaelira, the children are asking for you." Sarah had a small accident with her vocal abilities and shattered a serving platter. "No one's hurt, but she's upset." Vaelira recognized a rescue when she saw one. "Of course." "Excuse me, Duke Karsten." She left quickly, but not before seeing Draeven's expression transform the moment she was out of Karsten's sight. "She's remarkable," Karsten said, apparently oblivious to the danger. "If you're not formally claiming her, perhaps I could." "Finish that sentence and I'll remove your tongue." Karsten's smile froze. Draeven leaned in, his voice dropping to something lethal. "Vaelira is under my protection. The children's mother. A citizen of Frosthaven with my explicit guarantee of safety. That means she's not available for your political maneuvering or personal entertainment. Are we clear?" "I meant no disrespect." "Yes, you did. You saw a woman you perceived as unattached and assumed you could pursue her without consequence." Draeven's smile was sharp. "You assumed wrong. Stay away from her." He walked away before Karsten could respond. Vaelira found the children in a side room, as expected. Sarah was indeed crying over a broken platter, convinced she'd done something terrible. Lyra was trying to comfort her sister while Kieran and Talon built a fort from cushions, already over the drama. Vaelira knelt and pulled Sarah into her arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. Accidents happen." "I didn't mean to." Sarah's voice made the windows rattle slightly. "I know. But you're learning to control it. That takes time. Father says I'm getting better." "Father." The children had started calling Draeven that naturally, without prompting. It had made him visibly emotional the first time, though he'd hidden it quickly. "He's right. You are getting better." Vaelira kissed her daughter's forehead. "Now dry your tears and go show Kieran how high you can stack blocks without breaking them. I bet you can beat his record." Sarah's tears stopped immediately, competitive instincts activated. She ran to join her siblings. "You handled that well." Vaelira turned to find Draeven in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She just needed reassurance. Vaelira stood. "Thank you for the rescue earlier." Duke Karsten was persistent. He was inappropriate. Draeven's jaw tightened. "I made it clear he's not to approach you again." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." They looked at each other across the room, the children's laughter filling the background. "Draeven," Vaelira said slowly. "What are we doing?" "What do you mean?" "This. Us. We're raising children together. Spending every day together. You just threatened a duke for showing interest in me. But we've never actually discussed." She gestured between them. "This." Draeven was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know what we're doing," he finally admitted. "I just know that the idea of Karsten or anyone else pursuing you made me want to commit violence." "That's possessiveness." "It's more than that." He moved closer. I care about you, Vaelira. Not just as the children's mother. Not just as someone under my protection. As you. And I don't know what to do with that." Vaelira's heart raced. "Why not?" "Because I'm not good at this." "At feelings." I know how to rule. How to fight. How to make impossible decisions. I don't know how to, he struggled for words. How to be gentle. How to court someone. How to do any of this properly. Then don't do it properly, Vaelira said quietly. Just be honest. Draeven looked at her, really looked, and his carefully constructed defenses cracked. I want you, he said simply. Not just in my life. Not just in the Citadel. I want you as mine. As my mate. My equal. He stopped. But I don't know if you want that. Or if you're just here because you have nowhere else to go. Or because of the children. Or... Vaelira crossed the distance between them and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, but unmistakable. When she pulled back, Draeven looked stunned. I'm here because I choose to be, she said firmly. Because somewhere between bleeding in the snow and watching you hold our children for the first time, I fell in love with you. With your strength. Your protection. The way you're learning to be gentle despite everything. So yes, Draeven. I want that too. The smile that crossed his face was beautiful in its rarity. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her properly, deeply, with all the passion he'd been carefully restraining. Behind them, four children made exaggerated gagging sounds. Gross, Sarah announced. Father's kissing mother. Kieran sounded delighted. About time, Lyra said wisely, far too mature for her age. Talon just grinned from his cushioned fort. Draeven and Vaelira broke apart, both laughing. We have an audience, Vaelira said. Always. Draeven looked at the children with affection. But I don't care. He took Vaelira's hand and faced the four heirs. Your mother and I are formally courting, he announced. Which means, you're going to be mates. Sarah interrupted excitedly. Like in the stories. Eventually, yes. If she'll have me. Of course she will, Lyra said with absolute certainty. We already knew. Vaelira laughed. Did you? You look at each other funny, Kieran explained. And father growls when other wolves get too close to mother, Talon added quietly. Draeven had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. The children piled on both of them in a chaotic group hug, for blood-marked heirs accepting their parents' bond with the easy certainty of the young. And in that moment, surrounded by children and love and the future they'd built from ruins, Vaelira finally understood what home truly meant. If you're still watching, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me which child is your favorite. Like this video if you want to see more stories like this. The formal mating ceremony took place 3 months later. Frosthaven prepared for weeks, decorating the Great Hall with winter flowers and ice sculptures, preparing a feast that would feed 500 guests, crafting ceremonial robes that represented the union of king and commoner, strength and survival. The children were ecstatic. They helped with preparations, their unique abilities making certain tasks easier and others more chaotic. Kieran moved heavy furniture with ease. Sarah's perfectly controlled voice shattered ice into decorative shapes. Lyra sensed the emotional tone of every arrangement, adjusting details to create the right atmosphere. And Talon scouted security, his ability to fade from notice, making him perfect for checking defenses. They're more excited than I am, Vaelira admitted to Myrina during the final dress fitting. Because they understand what you're still learning, the old healer said, adjusting the silver embroidery on white silk. Family isn't just biology. It's choice. You and Draeven chose each other. Chose them. That's more powerful than any bloodline. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Every wolf in Frosthaven attended, plus dignitaries from allied territories. The Great Hall glowed with candlelight and magic, the ancient bonding rites carefully preserved for this moment. Draeven stood at the altar in formal black and silver, his crown replaced by a simple circlet. He looked nervous, which Vaelira found endearing. She walked down the aisle in white silk embroidered with scenes of snow and survival, her hair woven with winter roses. The 4 children walked ahead of her, dressed in matching ceremonial robes, carrying symbolic gifts. When she reached the altar, Draeven took her hands, and his expression transformed into something soft and open. The elder conducting the ceremony spoke the ancient words, but Vaelira barely heard them. She was focused on Draeven's face, on the way his hands trembled slightly, on the absolute certainty in his eyes. When it came time for the vows, Draeven spoke first. I vow to protect you, not because you're weak, but because you're precious. I vow to honor your strength, your resilience, your heart. I vow to be your partner, your equal, your home. His voice was steady but emotional. You saved me, Vaelira. Not from enemies or war. From becoming so cold I forgot how to feel. I'll spend my life proving worthy of that gift. Vaelira's tears fell freely. I vow to stand beside you, through politics and war and impossible choices. I vow to remind you that strength doesn't require ice, that power can be gentle. I vow to build a future with you that honors the past without being trapped by it. She smiled through tears. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave our children a father who teaches them to be powerful and kind. I'll spend my life cherishing that. The elder bound their hands with silver cord, speaking the final blessing. Before these witnesses, before pack and territory, you are mated. 2 wolves, 1 bond. May your union bring strength to Frosthaven and hope to those who follow. Draeven kissed her to thunderous applause, the 4 children cheering loudest of all. The celebration lasted through the night. Vaelira danced with Draeven, with visiting nobles, with common wolves who'd supported her from the beginning. The children ran wild through the hall, their joy infectious. At midnight, Talia approached the newly mated pair. My king. My queen. The title was new but fitting. There's someone at the border. Requesting asylum. Draeven's expression immediately shifted to alert. Who? A pregnant Omega. From the southern wastes. She says hunters are pursuing her. That she heard Frosthaven protects those marked as unnatural. Talia's expression was knowing. She's carrying twins. The healer who examined her says they're blood-marked. Draeven and Vaelira looked at each other. History repeating, Vaelira said quietly. Or continuing. Draeven turned to Talia. Bring her in. Full protection. Medical care. Safety. The nobles will protest. Let them. We've set a precedent. Now we honor it. He squeezed Vaelira's hand. Every marked child deserves a chance. We'll make sure they get it. Talia bowed and left. Vaelira leaned against Draeven, watching their 4 children dance with wild abandon across the hall. It's not going to be easy, she said. Building a kingdom that protects the marked. That challenges old laws. That chooses evolution over comfort. Nothing worth doing is easy. Draeven kissed the top of her head. But we'll do it anyway. Together. The children noticed their parents watching and ran over, pulling them both onto the dance floor. Lyra took Draeven's hand while Kieran grabbed Vaelira's. Sarah and Talon formed the other half of their circle. They danced together, family forged in impossible circumstances, under the watchful eyes of a kingdom learning to change. And outside, another marked child was crossing the border into safety, into hope, into a future that Vaelira and Draeven had fought to build. The bleeding moon prophecies had spoken of marked children bringing revolution. They were right. But it wasn't a revolution of violence or war. It was a revolution of compassion. Of choosing evolution over fear. Of proving that strength could protect instead of destroy. And it started with one king who chose mercy over tradition. One Omega who chose survival over surrender. And 4 children who would grow up learning that being marked didn't make them monsters. It made them exactly what the world needed. 5 years passed in transformation. The children grew with startling speed, their blood-marked heritage accelerating their development. At 5 years old, they had the physical presence of 8-year-olds and the intelligence of much older wolves. Lyra had become the diplomatic heart of the family, able to read emotional currents in court and mediate disputes with wisdom beyond her years. Her crimson eyes glowed when she used her empathic abilities, seeing through lies and political maneuvering with ease. Kieran trained daily with the Argent Guard, his enhanced strength requiring careful control. He could lift grown wolves by age 4 and had accidentally demolished a training wall by age 5. But under Draeven's patient guidance, he learned restraint, using power only when necessary. Sarah's voice had become legendary. She could shatter stone with a scream, harmonize with music to create emotional resonance that moved wolves to tears, or speak so softly only one person could hear her across a crowded room. She performed regularly in court, her abilities transforming from liability to art. And Talon had mastered the gift that made him most dangerous, absolute stillness. He could stand in plain sight and be completely overlooked, his presence somehow sliding from perception. It made him the perfect scout, the invisible observer who reported everything to his parents. Together, they were extraordinary. And they'd inspired change across the northern territories. Frosthaven had become a sanctuary for marked wolves. Pregnant Omegas fled persecution and found protection behind its walls. Children born with unusual abilities trained safely under Draeven's authority. The Citadel's population had doubled, filled with wolves deemed unnatural by traditional packs. Not everyone appreciated the transformation. Conservative territories called Frosthaven a corruption of pack law. 3 alliances had broken in protest. Border skirmishes increased as traditional packs tested Draeven's commitment to his new policies. But Frosthaven held. And every time another marked child crossed the borders into safety, Vaelira felt the rightness of what they'd built. She'd grown into her role as queen with surprising ease. The shy, desperate Omega who'd collapsed in the snow 5 years ago had evolved into a confident leader who commanded respect through compassion rather than fear. She sat in council meetings now, her insights valued by nobles who'd once called for her death. She mediated disputes, championed legal reforms, and worked with Myrina to establish healing centers specifically for difficult pregnancies. And every night, she returned to a family she'd never imagined having. Draeven had changed too. The ice-cold king who'd ruled through fear and calculated violence had learned warmth. He laughed more, smiled in ways that reached his eyes, played with the children without worrying about dignified appearances. He was still fierce when necessary, still capable of ruthless decision-making when Frosthaven's safety demanded it. But he'd learned balance. Strength and gentleness weren't opposites. They were partners. On the 5th anniversary of Vaelira's arrival, Draeven called the entire family to the boundary pillars where it had all begun. The black obsidian stones still stood sentinel, but now they were decorated with flowers and offerings from wolves who'd found safety in Frosthaven. The children ran ahead, their energy boundless despite the cold. "Why are we here?" Vaelira asked, taking Draeven's offered hand. "Because this is where it started. Where the pillars recognized what was coming." He looked at the 4 children examining the ancient runes with fascination. "I wanted them to see it. To understand their history." They stood together as Draeven explained to the children how the pillars had burned red, how Vaelira had collapsed right there, how everything had changed in that moment. "So we're special because of these rocks?" Sarah asked skeptically. "You're special because you exist," Vaelira corrected. "The pillars just recognized it before everyone else did." Lyra touched one of the obsidian surfaces, and faint crimson light pulsed in response. All 4 children's eyes glowed in answer. "They still recognize us," Lyra said wonderingly. "They always will," Draeven said. "You're marked. Connected to ancient magic that flows through pack law itself. That's not a burden. It's a gift." Kieran looked up at his father seriously. "Will we have to fight like you did? To protect marked wolves?" "Probably. The world changes slowly. But you won't fight alone. You'll have each other. And you'll have the foundation your mother and I built." Draeven knelt to be at eye level with all 4 children. "But remember, strength isn't about dominance. It's about protection. You use your gifts to defend those who can't defend themselves. To build, not destroy. Can you promise me that?" All 4 children nodded solemnly. "Good." Draeven pulled them into a group embrace, these impossible children who'd changed his world. Vaelira watched with her heart full, thinking about the journey from desperate refugee to queen, from hunted to protector, from alone to surrounded by love. A runner appeared from the citadel, breathless and urgent. "My king!" Another family at the border. Mother and 3 children. All marked. "They need asylum," Draeven finished, standing. "It's granted. Take them to the East Wing. Medical care, food, safety. Whatever they need." The runner bowed and left. Talon looked up at his parents. Will there always be more wolves running? Until the world changes enough that they don't have to, Vaelira said. But yes, probably for a long time. Then we'd better make Frosthaven bigger, Sarah declared practically. Draeven laughed. We're working on it. They walked back to the citadel together, family and future intertwined. The children ran ahead, their voices carrying on the cold wind, arguing about who could race fastest to the gates. Vaelira leaned against Draeven as they walked. We did it, she said quietly. Built something that matters. We did. He kissed her temple. Though I think we're just beginning. Those 4 are going to change the world. Like you did. Better than I did. Because they'll do it with compassion instead of fear. Vaelira smiled. You have compassion now. I learned it. From you. From them. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. 5 years ago, you collapsed at those pillars half dead and completely desperate. If someone had told me you'd become my queen, my partner, my hope, I wouldn't have believed them. If someone told me I'd love a king called the Winter Tyrant, I'd have thought they were insane. Fair point. His smile was warm. Thank you. For trusting me. For staying. For building this with me. Thank you for choosing mercy over tradition. For seeing possibility instead of threat. For proving that kings can be kind. They kissed there in the snow, while ahead of them 4 blood-marked children laughed and played without fear. The bastion of the bleeding moon stood strong against the winter sky, its walls protecting hundreds of marked wolves who'd found sanctuary within. And the story that had begun with one desperate Omega running through a blizzard had become a revolution. Not of violence. Of hope. The old laws were changing, slowly but inevitably. Territory by territory, pack by pack, wolves were learning that difference didn't equal danger. That marked children were gifts, not curses. That strength could protect instead of destroy. It would take generations to fully transform the North. But Vaelira and Draeven had started something that couldn't be stopped. For children who would grow into leaders. Who would teach the next generation? Who would prove that marked wolves could build instead of break? And every refugee who crossed the borders into Frosthaven's protection added to that future. The bleeding moon prophecies had been right. Blood-marked births did reshape the world. They just did it with love instead of war. That night, as the children finally settled into sleep after hours of excited chatter about their visit to the pillars, Vaelira stood at the window of the royal chambers, watching snow fall over her kingdom. Draeven joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. What are you thinking? He asked. That I'm grateful. For everything. Even the terror and the pain. Because it led here. To this family. This life. This future. No regrets. None. You. Draeven was quiet for a moment, his chin resting on her shoulder. I regret that my mother didn't live to see this. To see that her sacrifice protecting me led to all of this. That marked children can thrive instead of just survive. That the world she died hoping for is finally coming true. Vaelira turned in his arms to face him. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. I know so. She touched his face gently. You became the king she believed you could be. Strong enough to protect. Gentle enough to nurture. Brave enough to change everything. Draeven kissed her, pouring 5 years of love and partnership into the gesture. When they separated, his expression was soft. To the future, then. Whatever it brings. To the future, Vaelira agreed. And to every marked child who'll find safety here. Who'll grow up knowing they're valued, not hunted. Who'll change the world simply by existing without fear. They stood together at the window, king and queen, watching their kingdom sleep under falling snow. For blood-marked children dreamed in the next room. Hundreds of marked wolves rested safely within the citadel walls. And the future stretched before them, full of possibility. The bleeding moon had marked them all. But they'd transformed that mark from curse to crown. From death sentence to dynasty. From fear to hope. And the story they'd started together would echo through generations, proving that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a single act of mercy. A king who chose compassion. An Omega who chose survival. And 4 children who chose to transform the world. Before you go, Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss stories like this. Drop a like if this journey moved you and comment which moment hit you hardest. This is the kind of content I create, and your support means everything. Thanks for watching until the very end.